Okay, welcome everybody. This is our Tuesday, April 5th, 2022 session in our series on entrepreneurship and Asian high-tech industries. I'm really happy to be able to introduce a good friend as well as colleague today. But before I do that, a couple of business items. First of all, remember that the way attendance works for the class now is Stanford expects you, if you're registered, to be here in person. If you want an accommodation, those of you who've contacted me know I'm pretty easy about that, but you must send me a note to say that you want to either watch remotely one day or watch the series remotely and give me some sort of a reason, okay? So that's important. Don't just not show, because we are taking attendance at some random point during the session today. And if you're not here to sign the attendance sheet and you don't have some email trace of me giving permission or accommodation or whatever you call it, it means your attendance is not going to get credited. So that's something to watch out for. Also remember that for those of you taking the course for credit, the comments from last week's session will be due 1 week from today. So don't try to save up all your comments until later. They're due within 2 weeks of the day of the session. And I've had some really good comments already and have really enjoyed reading what you've written so far. So yeah, are there any questions on that from anybody in the room? Okay, great. So today, I'm very happy that we have someone who's really active between the US and China to come and talk about what it's like to kind of have one foot in both countries in this sort of challenging time. Dr. Chenyang Xu is working between Silicon Valley and Guangzhou. On the technical side, he got his master's and Ph.D. in electrical and computer engineering from the Johns Hopkins University. And he's been elected an IEEE fellow. This is a big deal. The IEEE is the big professional society for electrical engineers worldwide. And as a fellow, he was recognized for pioneering research and leadership in artificial intelligence and healthcare. On the business side, what he's going to talk about most today is the company Perception Vision Medical Technologies, PVmed, which he is a president and also co-chair of the company. The company is based in Guangzhou, but I'm not sure, maybe they have a US subsidiary already or a US company already. And he's also co-founder of an ed tech company called Silicon Valley Future Academy, and a venture capital company called Brightway Future Capital. He's on the advisory boards of the Department of Biomedical Engineering for Johns Hopkins. He was on the advisory board for EE and CS at UC Berkeley. He's on the advisory board for the IEEE, the Institute, the very central leadership group there. And he's also an advisor to the Youth AI Lab. He knows big business corporate innovation because he was the general manager and chief technology officer for Siemens Tech to Biz, which was a Berkeley-based kind of open innovation group inside the company that was dedicated to doing partnerships with startup companies and also investments in startup companies. So Chenyang is going to talk to us about PVmed and about his experiences, and I'm really delighted to turn the microphone over to Chenyang. Thanks for coming today.
Thank you so much, Richard, for inviting me, and it's a pleasure to meet the people in this room. So for today, we're going to tackle, I would say, a quite difficult topic. Myself, actually, I came to the States when I was 22-year-old, went to Hopkins, spent a long time there, and then joined Siemens, was with Siemens for 17 years. So my knowledge of China, actually, other than go there, travel for vacation and seeing friends and family, by and large, it was more experience with Europe for almost 2 decades, as well as US. It's about like 7 years ago when Siemens was looking to China for particularly innovation startups, where I have traveled there for some business. And then I left Siemens about 5 years ago after 17 years. And basically was resided in Silicon Valley and have the Silicon Valley Future Academy and a small investment fund. And meanwhile, it was by accident, I went to China for a keynote and then found this little startup was only 3 months old. And we was trying to revolutionize cancer treatment with the use of machine learning. And it was a professor from Song Yat-sen University and Hospital in Guangzhou. So I found that very intriguing because I started my career at Hopkins, trained in medical imaging, as well as at Siemens, but later transitioned for since 2009 in the business and investment partnership side, and mainly on the innovation management side. So I haven't been on the, I would say, the front line of advanced research for over, I would say, a long time, more than a decade. But nevertheless, seeing what's going on and the possibility of, you will hear a little bit later, helping with the cancer patients treatment in China, but particularly, with China being the country with the biggest cancer deaths in the world, 30% of the worldwide population, cancer deaths occurred in China, and much behind healthcare in the US and other developed countries. It actually could be a very exciting launchpad for actually, to really contribute the fight for the cancer globally back here in the US. So, but as I said, this is a very difficult topic, given the world has been very different things 5 years ago. I will mention about that because of particularly US-China trade war. So the situation has been quite difficult. But I hope in this session, you will get some perspective more as, because I'm not the expert on the overall political, decision system. I have been having a lot of exchanges, including Professor Desher, who is expert on this topic over the last 5 years and really keep up with what's going on. And but on the other side, really on a more practitioner side. So hopefully that will offer some food for thought at the end. And then, so the talk is going to be about less than 30 minutes, just to frame. Rather than talk about PVmed, I would like to frame the overall context. And because when I was back heading the Siemens Tech Venture of North America, where we looking for startups, technology startups and university research to commercialize for Siemens globally, I realized even though technology product company is at the center of the actions, but the ecosystem, the environment, the policy, it's a huge force that you need to really understand and to really have optimal result. So I'm going to leveraging that part of my expertise and share you some of my own observations about overall, the reality of the world we're operating and how do I see that from healthcare, and then zoom in a bit at the end about PVmed for my talk, and then we'll have a fireside chat, a virtual fireside chat with Professor Desher, and then we'll go on the Q&A. Okay, so. Alrighty, so let me go. So first, start with a disclaimer. All the opinions expressed in this talk will be solely my own opinions. It does not reflect the view of the host, nor does it represent Stanford's view, nor does it represent PVmed or other organization I was associated with or currently associated with. Okay, let's get that out of the way. I have been in entrepreneurship for a long time, and also like a geek, like many of you maybe in the audience. And when I was 18, I actually had a first patent in China for a 3-way circuit to help nurse to reach the patient faster. And then seeing the stamp, the signature from the head of the National Patent Bureau of China when I was 18, that was quite a joy, I have to say. And then, career-wise, I came to US and then finished my Ph.D. and then joined Siemens, and then really have done a lot of healthcare, particular, like products that using medical imaging, CT/MR, ultrasound to really help treating patients, surgery-wise, or minimally invasive surgery, robotic surgery. It was a lot of learning and work with a number of leading organizations, both in US and Europe, but also some in Asia. So So for that, I always believe, and then back when I was at Siemens Tech Ventures, I was there for 8 years. And so my team looked around about 10,000 startups and research ideas worldwide. That's a big number over that 8 years. So I've seen across not only healthcare, but also in manufacturing, mobility, energy, city and infrastructures. Every business Siemens, 80 billion euros touches, 200 countries, 365,000 employees worldwide back then. So it was a very eye-opening experience to see the innovators, entrepreneurs, how they are reinventing, reimagining the future, and in front of the very whiteboard, I had, with my team, with the entrepreneur visiting us. It's, of course, many ideas will fail, but each failing ideas will feed into a new ideas, and some will succeed. And it's an incredibly, rewarding experience. So I do genuinely believe that we can solve world's biggest problem through entrepreneurship, not just relying on the government and to solve all the issues. In fact, we should be the central force for doing that. So with that said, I want to acknowledge we're in a new global reality. I think not only I see folks in the room are younger, many of them much younger than me, but I have to say in my career, I have never seen most drastic change, a new reality of the world in the last 2 years. It's very disorienting. Not only we have a once of a century COVID pandemic that fundamentally changed how we live, how we work, how we study, how we relate to each other. But also, sadly, we have real wars going on. We have seen horrendous killings and destruction, which is just unimaginable even just a few months ago. But also we see trade wars. Trade wars, we don't have weapons that we can see destructions. Lives lost, but it's as I would say destructive as the real war that affected millions of businesses and people around the world, especially the US-China trade war started in 2018. But also we have a stock market roller coaster started with COVID, and it's been a lot of experts for investment has been proven wrong because this patterns has not been seen before, and it's pretty crazy roller coaster ride. But also parallel, we still have the global fight for diseases. We have now COVID. We have to race to come up with not only vaccine, but treatment. But also we still have cancers going on, which is killing people more so than COVID, and the wars we're fighting. We also have diabetes, cardiovascular disease, many other diseases that need treatment. And then also we have climate change. I think it was a few days ago, I saw an article talking about in Antarctic. There is a big piece of plan of the ice that actually melted. It's the size of New York City. Now, what makes it dramatic is not the size, it's the location. It's on the east side of Antarctic. And that location had never melted in the entire human history, according to the research. First time ever that melted. That was not considered possible because of the sudden rise of the temperature. And also we have income inequality, ratio, social, unrest in US and in many countries. And we see a deglobalization, the order that we knew since World War II, and then it's kind of being disruptive. And now we have to look for a new relationship of world order. And nobody is sure how that will, pan out. But on the other side, I have to say that there are lots of biggest problems in the world. If we could solve, we'll hope make the world a better place. United Nations have identified 17 goals of 2030 agenda, really a call for all people on this planet to try to contribute. Not only the universities, institute, corporate, startups, anybody, NGOs, but also for youth. My daughter, she last year she was 15. She actually participated younger and then looking to this contributing as a high school students into how to help. They had a lot of fascinating conversations as well. So this is, there are 17 of them, just to name a few, poverty, and also you get the hunger, right? And you have good health, well-being, right? There are all diseases, quality education, if you look at, and also in terms of life on land, climate action, many of them, which is really urgently need actions. But let's look at the US-China relationship since the trade war. The two nations' political relationship have been not easy, in the last 40 years. There are always the debate of whether it's a strategically, collaborative or competitive because of a fundamentally different ideology. But the two countries managed to work together on a number of issues, especially on trade, education. I wouldn't be here, speaking to you if it wasn't because of the two country relationship back in the early 90s. Really spent my adult life in the US, right? And contribute to the economy here, but also worldwide, Europe and Asia. But right now we are definitely at the lowest in decades. And also, if you look at the direct investment, it's the lowest in the last 5 years. So since the start of the trade war, August 2018, and there was a lot of action taken on both sides, US and China, and on various of tariffs, expanded entity list, as well as new CFIUS, which just means Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, and on technology and M&A and investment, make it increasingly very hard and more complex for US and China and other companies in other countries to really participate this and navigate the cross-border business and investment relationship.
Hey, Chenyang, can I interrupt you
Sure.
real quick? So why August 2018?
That's
Is that the arrest of the relative of the Huawei founder?
not really. I think that was when the tariff was installed by
Okay,
Trump.
okay.
Yeah. So according to the timeline, I researched that. I think the arrest came later, a little later, on the entity list. But nevertheless, the starting point, the single biggest reason is trying to reduce the trade deficit. But last year, this is the new data from New York Times that was published only a month, 2 months ago, that basically U.S. trade deficit hit a record in 2021 as the China gap widens. The export to China increased by 20% over 2020, from 2021 to actually 2020. There was a spelling error. But on the trade to the US side also rise 14%, which is the highest since 2018. So there are experts talking this definitely hasn't worked, and for a variety of reasons. So it does require new policy, new thinking, if that's one of the primary goals. But there's always also obviously other goals as well, and in terms of improved US strategic competitiveness. But if you look at the direct investment, there was a curbing with the serious rules, not really limit the investment from China background investment into the valley or US. That has fell tremendously, like in the last 5 years, 85%. And the US investment in China has fallen about 30%, which on one side, obviously, because of the geopolitical atmosphere is one reason, but also the COVID situation where China had a dynamic zeroing policy, not allowing foreign, non-Chinese national, unless you're the head of some corporate, to enter China, and that also contribute to that. So it's a combined effect, not as drastic as the money to the US side, but nevertheless, you can see the reality. So a lot of, I met a lot of, whether it's investor, entrepreneurs, or business people, they would think twice and 3 times to think, how do we continue between the US-China relationship? And in a lot of fields, especially in semiconductors or certain area of technology, this become almost impossible. But I have to say, this situation will continue, but there's also other backdrop we have to notice. It's the big trend. One trend I call the startup boom trend and the rise of global entrepreneurs. And if you look at the data from CD Insights, we have seen a dramatic increase of unicorn. In fact, as of the beginning of this year, for the first time in the history, we have reached 1,000 unicorns worldwide. And that compared to 5 years ago, it's about a quarter of that. So, just tremendous innovations, and, with COVID, really have accelerated the digital transformation or disruption, however you look at it, of the next 5 years or 10 years down to the, this last 2 or next 2. And I'd say China has really rise up tremendously. But I think the last 2 years, really it's back to the, the Bay Area is leading the way. So the other data on the bottom, you can see it's 2020 June data. It listed the top 8 locations in the world that has most number of unicorns. So you can certainly see the San Francisco Bay Area, of course, Silicon Valley is leading the way. But interestingly, of the top 8, 4 actually came from China. Beijing is second, New York is third, Shanghai is the fourth, and London is the only one from Europe. And then Hangzhou, I guess a lot of people may not even know Hangzhou, it's a big city in China, is where Alibaba was created. And then Shenzhen, which is dubbed as the Silicon Valley of China, and then Boston. But what this data doesn't show you is there are in everywhere, whether it's Asia, Southeast Asia, India, or Europe, or South America, Africa, there are tremendous groundswell of entrepreneurship and startups. I have participated in a lot of Europe ecosystem in my time, heading the Siemens Tech Venture, and as well, of course, Israel, and also Asia, and Paris. There are a lot of new things, Berlin. So just name a few. So this data doesn't show you, but this does show you startup at scale when you talk about unicorn, which is a valuation of $1 billion USD. The other thing is really the rise of global tech. Tech entrepreneurs. I've seen this when I was heading the Siemens Tech Venture, tech business, back more than 10 years ago. I've seen a lot of countries, like Germany, France, Asia. They set up office in Silicon Valley, New York, Boston, and they will help attract entrepreneurs from their home country and free of charge to really help accelerate them, learn the US way, and help them connect the customers, the ecosystem here, the investment, and even set up models as what I call a global tech entrepreneur from the early stages. They will set up their business headquarters in Silicon Valley, for example, Boston, New York, and meanwhile have their engineering, have their other team back in the home country. And because of the ease of communication, the very low cost, and whether it's voice communication or video communication, make it possible. But also before COVID, the ease and affordable traveling, which we've been sorely missing, also make that possible. And of course, there are challenges that you can handle when you're not one location. But definitely, I think the younger generation has really adapted this very well. I mean, COVID, of course, proved that. So I call that the rise of global tech entrepreneurs. That was from an article, a series of articles I did with IEEE on tech entrepreneurship. And if you're interested, you can read, on the right side, that article or others. But basically, the other reason is there are a lot of accelerators, incubators, and investors. They are set up global office, and they also help to make these kind of connections. The key thing is really try to access the technology, customers, talents, and funding. And for any special application, often for a lot of locations in the world, even including big cities around the world, these 4 often should, does not coincide in one location. For example, in Europe, the founders fund, raising funding is very difficult. And so coming here raise funding, but the problem is back in Europe, right? That model can, and the talents as well, it's much cheaper. Same, I have advised a startup from Africa, and then they are looking at solving medical supply problem using AI. And meanwhile, they have an office in Silicon Valley, So another company in Silicon Valley called Zipline, it's actually funded by Hopkins biomedical engineering alumni of mine. And he basically with his co-founder of the team, they actually started a business in Africa, helping dropping medical supply, blood supply within 30 minutes using a drone to countries that need, remote area, need this emergency delivery. Otherwise people will die. And then build up this proof point, and then it came back to US, and now it's a unicorn. So it's remarkable how you can use the global resource, at early stage, which we didn't see before. Because back 10 years ago, I advised a lot of portfolio companies of mine. They have, already have 100 people, have in the growth stage, to slow down to access other global markets because the complexity, so time has changed. And so certainly there are ways to deal with that. It's not easy, but there's advantage like culture, how do you think globally, identify global needs, and also there's more diverse funding. So this is something keep in mind. It's a big trend. But the other side is, given the relationship currently US and China facing, should US and China still collaborate? I think there are areas that need to be strategic competitive. US has to assert itself and build its advantage and re-innovate US, right, to be the leaders, and China as well, and other countries. But there are areas that collaboration is needed, especially in the area that UN identified to be the global issue faced the entire humanity. So I will use the perspective from the global fight for cancers to illustrate that. And one thing I learned, last few years was very interesting is the China biotech boom. And the chart shows the biotech and CRO, CDMO, which are developing early stage developing drugs and research. You can see this chart has jumped tremendously. In fact, the market value of the listed biopharma groups from China on the Hong Kong, Shanghai, and Nasdaq exchange surged from $3 billion only 5-6 years ago to $240 billion, 80-fold. That's incredible. And so this is according to McKinsey data. And the reason for that is one area is the CAR-T. This is a new form of targeted drug development using immune and then technology to help fight cancer. And in some diseases, it shows to be very promising, but it's very expensive. So there are a lot of innovation on that front. And so there are a lot of companies, global companies, particularly US, like J&J, on the right side, they're targeting more Chinese biotech deals because they have success with Chinese-funded Legend Biotech resulted in US FDA approval for CAR-T cancer therapy. There are several other big US pharma groups like Eli Lilly, AbbVie, and Amgen. They have clinched the similar agreements. Amgen CEO actually talked about it's imperative to engage China to speed up this kind of development. And they actually, once they develop that and license the deals, not only used in the US, but also other markets in the world to help fight the cancer. So Western drug makers, they did a dozen major deals. Each deal is valued at $900 million, right? So we're not talking small deal. It's a big deal. And just in the last 2 years. And one of the head of J&J Global Oncology Division, Peter Lovitz, he actually told the Financial Times back, before 2015, like 5-6 years ago, Chinese biotech company will do a better version of what's happening in US or Europe, more customized for China. But these days in China, there's true innovation, that's quote unquote. And Nature has an article published recently said clinical trials on new cancer drugs that typically take 10 to 15 years to be in the US or developed country can be sped up to 2 to 3 years because the China participation. This is probably from Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in New York. For those who are in the field know, MSK is one of the top leading cancer center in the US. In fact, he said that example in population in New York City is the most populated city in the US. But if you look at the 50 different special cancer types divided up, and then certain cancer disease, you just don't have enough patients to do clinical trial. But in China, you will. And so this is, if I would ask anyone in the room or on the Zoom that anyone do not know any of your family members, God forbidden, and friends or people you know, them or their family have cancer in the last 1 year, to raise the hand, I bet it will be very few. It's that bad, right? And so it's very tragic and very big hit to the lives of people who have it. And also US News, also just January, this is actually 2 years ago, had the US-China cancer study offers new hope for the treatment of the rare, deadly childhood leukemia. May have implications for affiliate children around the world because it was just not enough these children in US to really come with this viable strategy, but their lives, every single one of their life matters, right? And so, but in China, you could really push that forward and really benefit the work. So there are many reasons. Also, I didn't have the time today, but I have research from all the leading cancer institutes, you're talking Harvard, Mayo, Hopkins, even Stanford, and here, all have collaboration with China on cancer research. And so this is kind of very interesting. So why cancer is so important, right? I think we all intuitively know this is a very deadly disease, but I have to say US has been one of the role model in the last 20 years and really have improved, the treatment, early detection treatment of cancer. In fact, US is it's the first country in the world that the cancer rate death rate has gone down. Unlike China and many other countries, particularly developing countries, the cancer rate still go up and the projected next 20 years will not go down. And so, but nevertheless, cancer killed 10 million people worldwide, and just in 2020 alone, and compares to 6.15 million people died from COVID since the beginning in the last more than 2 years, right? So it's a it's really killing a lot of people. And it's the second leading cause of the deaths, just behind the cardiovascular disease. But the cost-wise, healthcare is more than the cardiovascular, also according to some study. So what health organization, because cancer is a more slow disease, often you have to have multiple treatment during the course, and it's different. WHO actually showed the global cost for cancer is close to 900 billion USD, and that's 1.5% of the global GDP. So it's quite sizable. And cumulative cancer deaths globally from 2020 and 2040, according to a study, if you estimate, it will be more than 200 million people. That's a lot of people, think about it, right? So in the next 20 years, if we don't change the course of fight of the cancer, have more weapons to really cure, early detection, cure treatment, we'll have more people die. And China alone will reach more than 60 million deaths. And that's, if you count as a population, sadly, as a country, that would be the top 25 most populous country in the world. But annually, it's more than 3 million. It will grow to 5 million in 2040, and contribute to 30% of the deaths in the world. And in China, also, the occurrence of the cancer is actually ranked about more than 70. So it's not very high, but just the deaths-wise, China actually is the most. But in the US and developed countries, because cancer is aging related as well, has more occurrence, but the death rate is better. But still, US will reach 10 million deaths in the next 20 years, about 500,000 deaths on average annually, and 5% of the total deaths. So this is still a huge number, huge burden. So let's spend a few more minutes on the PVmed case. It's really a journey to deploy machine learning and other technology that are developed in China, in Guangzhou, by the professor founder from Sun Yat-sen University and Hospital with the doctors there. And Sun Yat-sen Hospital and University is, among the best in China. And Sun Yat-sen Cancer Hospital actually treat more cancers on particular head and neck than, pretty much most of the hospitals in the world. So it's a huge center of competence there that has a deep collaboration with US and Europe. The mission of the company is really to strive for a world that no longer fears cancer. It's a big, ambitious goal. It will take many, many years to get there, but this is, the mission of the founder, so this is why I get inspired. It was founded in 2017, I mentioned, and by Professor Yao Lu from Sun Yat-sen University and the Cancer Center, and his college classmate, Dr. Shuo Shen. And the company now has presence in Guangzhou, Hong Kong, Singapore, US, Germany, and Kenya. And most other presence is more research collaboration or regulatory partners. Has over about 100 people now. Really, the goal is trying to use the machine learning, new generation machine learning, where I actually studied at Hopkins a long time ago. Haven't been in the front line for over a decade, but it was really remarkable because I worked on this problem many, many years ago to see the new generation technology can really help the doctor to really build personalized organs, 3D organs from their CT, MR, and that can, hundreds of them, in the past, even do 1 or 2 would take years of development. These days, you can just learn from the top physician experts, and then the AI learned it, and then will deploy to many other hospitals who don't have resource. In China, there's a huge sparse of doctors available. They're more centralized in the top hospitals, unlike in US. And so in fact, even early screening, treatment, I was at the conference that was spoke by a cancer hospital president. He said more than half of the patients in China could have get treated if they have access to the resource or affordable or the doctors. So imagine, right? And so in this case, it's showing a picture that a whole body, about 100 plus called organs at risk during the radiation therapy will be outlined. And so doctors can devise scheme to really radiate the tumors, which show in the middle. This target is show 1 on the head and neck. But right now there's 10 tumor types throughout the body, and to really try to deliver the dosage to the tumor to kill the tumor through about a session, about 20 to 30 sessions, but minimize the damage to the organs, right? Like the brain, eyes, and many other organs. And then with the new generation technology, it drastically improved the efficiency down. The doctor would spend like 5, 4, 6 hours to do the doctor has to do that because it requires medical knowledge. the model, and now with the machine learning as an aid, it can really shrink down to 20, 30, 50 minutes. That is a 6x speed up.
So, Chenyang, can I interrupt again?
Sure.
This may be on a subsequent slide, but the time that you're taking is diagnosis of the cancer, or is that?
This is not diagnostic. This is on the treatment side. So it's
on the treatment side.
Cancer patients already diagnosed.
I can see two different applications.
Correct.
One is detection.
In fact, yeah.
But the other is actually understanding the shape of the tumor so that you can cut it out or
Correct.
make sure you
Correct.
don't damage other
Yeah, that's
organs.
so just that was an excellent question, and we can go deeper later. But basically, if you look at the cancer, it's from WHO, it's early screening, early detection, early diagnosis, and early treatment, and you get a chance to improve the outcome of survival. There have been last 5 years a lot of funding in the US and China, elsewhere in the world, on the detection and diagnosis side. Detection is to answer the question, yes and no, you have cancer. A large population may not, but some will. And then they go on the diagnosis. Diagnosis, you can use non-invasive imaging, CT, MR, to really diagnose. But the confirmation, what type of cancer, the stages need using biopsy, using pathology. And once that's confirmed, then it goes to the oncologist to treat it with drug, and often always 60% will use radiation therapy, and 60% also using surgery to remove it, and also chemotherapy. These are the primary three. But also you got this new drug like CAR-T. So
can I ask one more?
Sure.
So the input is medical images,
Correct.
taken just by
Beforehand,
MRI or
CT.
whatever regular old
Yeah.
medical images.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. And then we're just basically replacing the doctor, modeling with aid of the new generation.
Yeah.
It's assisted. It's aided surgery treatment. But this is also shown on other, the cancer like lung, esophageal, breast, and cervical, and many others all see the similar speed up. So the results today, really, I wouldn't call the company a success yet, but it's on the journey to have promising result. So at Greater China, they have received 2 NMPA Class 3 approval. It used to be called CFDA. So for those who medical, it's a big deal because this treatment class 3 is the highest one and allow you to really, indicate the safety, and you can really sell it. It covers 10 plus types of cancers. And so far, basically in the last year and a half has deployed over 100 hospitals, has aided treatment of 120,000 patients in 2 years. And this would be very difficult for a startup to achieve here in the US, population-wise, hospital-wise. It's just a bigger need there. But then once you build up that competence, then you can take that solution worldwide, including the US. In the US, also earlier this year, got the FDA approval, 510K, that allows the product to be commercialized in the US. But in this case, it's US is a significant higher barrier and more cost. And the approach taking is using commercialization through partnership, technology licensing with the US medical device manufacturer, who already have the channels and hospitals. And so they can embed that technology into their solution and take care of regulatory approval, go to market. And so that's the strategy so far. And then the rest of the world and Europe, there's equity investment received last fall from Philips, which basically see the company as a leading provider on this critical problem, not only in China, but globally. And also was research collaboration with leading university in Europe. In Southeast Asia, there was a clinical research collaboration with National University of Cancer Institute Singapore, which has been a long-term collaborator with Song Yixian Hospital, where the professor and oncologist has worked very closely over a long time. And also in Africa, there was collaboration with Kenyans, University of Nairobi, Cheremi Cancer Institute, and currently exploring that part as well. So the goal is really to achieve treatment of 1 million cancer patients worldwide by 2026 and 10 million by 2031. It's a huge, audacious, goal. But a year and a half reaching over 100,000 patients do make the company and our partners hopeful we can make a dent of the global fight of the cancer. So this is what I want to see about the cancer. But I have to go back to why this is a big deal on the cancer field. it's not only one of the 17 goals of the United Nations, but also this may offer, I would say, a place where U.S. and China and also other countries to put aside disagreements or geopolitical problems and to collaborate, because there are massive amount of people's lives at stake, particularly back here at the home U.S. I have to say I'm a big fan of Kevin Root. Kevin Root was a former Prime Minister of Australia. I have been fortunate, heard many talks of him in person, because after he's a global expert on policy, but particularly US-China. He spoke fluent Mandarin. He really knows the China culture. In Silicon Valley, in the business and venture, we see culture eats everything for lunch. So we have a lot of problem dealing with geopolitics. We don't understand each other's culture. I personally, at this observation, that was the root cause of some major issues. But Kevin really understands, different cultures. And also he's not in China, he's not US, he's more, impartial. So he was speaking last August on, he's now the CEO of the Asia Society, headquartered in New York City, on the topic of advance the global fight against cancer and achieve a moonshot in the post-pandemic era. Some may know that back in President Obama with Vice President Biden had identified a new moonshot as cancer cure back in Obama time. And obviously President Biden made that part of his campaign promise and really continue to push for that. Tragically, one of his sons actually died from, cancer. And so this is one area, it's a huge, urgent problem. I found this report before I prepared the talk, and I kind of knew his position before, but this is very interesting. Just recently I saw it, and I want to share with you guys some of his quote. He actually said this cancer collaboration could open door for the new ping pong diplomacy. Some of you may know, history buff, that US and China were actually essentially at war back in the 70s. And they fight on the Korean War, and the US didn't even recognize China. They was recognized the former head of China, which went to Taiwan. But then it was really two young athletes of a 20 minutes ride. I think I remember it was in Japan, a world competition on ping pong. And then the US athlete, I think he was a teenager, I remember, went on the wrong bus because he was late on his practice. He ran on the Chinese athlete bus. And they were very awkward, as you can imagine, but then after 5-10 minutes, the two athletes, they stare at each other, they decide to talk to each other. The Chinese side doesn't speak much English, but they use gift to show goodwill. Eventually, that basically started melting that big icy relationship. And then, of course, the rest was history. And so if the ping pong, two young, men, on a bus in 10 minutes could potentially have such a big impact, many years later, could we still have such opportunity to really, of course, the old map of how China-US work, it's no longer valid. There's a legitimate reason it happened this way. The new map has to be built collectively, right? But so far, I don't think we have it. It requires tremendous, experience, wisdom, insight, but also cultural understanding, and where the leaders of the country want the country to be in the next 10, 20, or the whole century. But nevertheless, the new map has to be built. We're in the middle of that big grand shift of transition. But nevertheless, I think there are people, organizations, we could look for such opportunity because we do have an impact to the future of the two biggest economies on the world. He actually said, given all that's going wrong in the US-China relationship, we should turn cancer collaboration between China and the United States into a ping pong diplomacy of the 21st century, which is a very interesting remark. If those guys could play ping pong to bring the US-China relationship in from the code back in the early 1970s, 50 years ago, then I think we can do something similar now if we put our mind, I would say collective mind to it, right? And Rod also was hopeful about the collaboration between two countries because the fight against cancer, he said, cuts right across political and ideological divides into people's lives. The last one was the most interesting. He said, the great thing about the United States is that normally when politicians are, we all know that our Republicans and Democrats don't talk to each other anymore. They did talk to each other about this cancer. he said, this is really important, the idea of actually being able to have a bipartisan project in the United States on cancer treatment, cancer drug research, and a bilateral initiative between China and the United States, because it transcends politics at home and abroad. I think this is exceptionally exciting thing. It really hit the home, and for me personally. And interestingly, about 3 months later, less than 3 months later, there was a new coalition has been formed. Global drug makers, regulatory officials, and scientists, they're teaming up, launched the Bloomberg New Economy International Cancer Coalition in Singapore. So they take a location in small agnostic, and with the aim to push the US and China to cooperate on research to speed up the process of developing cancer drugs. And this newly created body through, it will help facilitate the two countries to collaborate, despite the current recriminations and divisions between the superpowers during the pandemics. So I thought this was a very, interesting observation, insights from one of the most experienced politicians, in the world. So I just thought it was interesting. So to conclude the talk part, I have a pendulum. I think we know everything in the world works like a rhythm pendulum. The two countries' relationship does not examine that too. So we had more than 40 years of engagement development, and then the last 4 years, it's trying to resettle for a new relationship. How long this pendulum of the current, the worsening relationship will be developed? I don't know. It's not my specialty. I felt, will go on for quite some time for many fields before it gets resolved to a new map that we can, cooperate or at least work towards for the future. But nevertheless, it will come back one day. But before that, we are dealing with headwinds, adversity of the geopolitical issue, and also other issues. So I want to leave you with a quote from Henry Ford, which I thought was quite appropriate to close the talk portion of mine. He actually said, when everything seems to be going against you, remember that the airplane takes off against the wind, not with it. So I do think for people who are creative, who are innovative, and if you are having a worthy cause to fight, whether it's cancer or climate change, whatever you're passionate, that will help the humankind, that we live on this planet, very unique planet. Then I think just go take the adversity and then innovate your way through use of partners, use the resources available on this earth. So that's all I want to say. So I will conclude my part of the talk, and we'll move on to the virtual facet.
That's great, Chenyang. Why don't you stop sharing your
Thank
thoughts?
you. Yeah.
You went to a conference in China a few years ago,
Yeah,
and happened to meet this professor who had started this company. When you decided to get involved with it, what was your biggest surprise? Going back and really starting a company in China, what were you prepared for, and what were you surprised at?
I have to say that there are many surprises, because my entire adult life was in the US, and also my thinking, my experience, my know-how. I do think the biggest surprise is the culture of working, not the culture of living, but more the working side. The challenge, we know the famous 996, of course, Silicon Valley work hard and play hard, but in general, China is another scale, and that is very difficult, I guess, for me, but also.
I remember hosting a group of Chinese entrepreneurs here a little bit before the pandemic.
Yeah.
And I asked them what they thought about the Valley, and they said, it's so slow.
Yeah. Definitely. I have a lot of examples for that. The other thing I would say, it surprises me that because China is a huge country that's changing real since when it opens up, in the late 70s, early 80s. Think about the, big train and changing rail for 40 years. So there's always the old side, there's the new side. But the speed of China is developing on all aspects. It's just mind-boggling. I've been to Europe for many times, and US. I can just tell you, I used to take the Siemens CEOs and our partner CEO or executive to a restaurant called Skates on the Bay Sea on the Marina, Berkeley Marina. It's a very nice seafood restaurant in Berkeley. There was a road off the 80, and there was a lot of hopes on the road ever since I arrived the Bay Area in 2009 from the East Coast, New Jersey. And I was always wishing, think about Berkeley, potholes, that should be repaired, etc. For 10 years, it never was done. It was just keep bumping. It's a very terrible experience for these top executives from around the world to see that the road is more like a third world country. I don't know why. Only yesterday, actually, this weekend, I brought a friend there. It was just being repaired. So same thing in Europe. I went to a hospital that under construction for 5 years. And with scaffold, etc. So but in China, everything was had a warp speed and like high-speed train. We didn't have it. Now in last 10 years, it has the most extensive high-speed train. I encourage when COVID opened up, some of you go to China, try that out. It's mind-boggling. It's 350 kilometers per hour. And in California, we still manage trying to build the biggest field to, a small segment after 10 years. So I think the reason I'm getting to is with the changing rail and also the fast speed. I found it was even for me to go there. I don't know how work culture should be and what's right, what's not, just from the surface. And so engaging on work level, because they're picking up, people there are picking up a lot of ways of working of the West. But meanwhile, would also preserve ways of East.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, the West way of working is all I know. So it's very hard. But aside from that, it's technology, engineering development. The local education has increased, leap and bounds. And some obviously are contribution of professors or Ph.D. scientists, graduate from US and go back. But also the local educated professors, and they have been, because the information has been readily available around the world, has been tremendous. So that was the speed of all these development was, very uncomfortable.
Yeah, okay. The 3-month-old company and a professor in charge of it. Was the professor, how did he react when you said we really should be global with this?
I think the number one, he actually got his PhD from US many years ago. Yeah, so but he went back to China pretty long time ago, a decade ago. He actually got in this field in China, and he went back because he's seen friends, relatives, and the terrible situation in China, the cancer hospital, the number of patients and family members in the outpatient center is more than the people in the train station. Just coordinates. It's scary, right? And so he really want to help people there. So he has a cause, but he also know globally this is a big problem.
Yeah.
So I do think he wanted to do that, but obviously as a Chinese company it's hard. But since I've been with Siemens for a long time, and I think I can help on the globalization of the company. So kind of practice what I've been preaching, talk about Rise Global and tax.
So do you think that if you hadn't gotten involved, would the company have been as aggressively going global as it has been? I mean, it's really impressive since 2017.
Yeah, I think even if I don't get involved, I do think it will happen. It's just a matter of time, maybe a little bit later.
Yeah.
If you look at the biotech boom, right, because there's a huge market is developing on the cancer side, we talk about 5 times faster, maybe, a few times faster, and there was abundant funding. So once they reach certain critical mass, it's a matter of time they will go global. But also we know from COVID, disease doesn't know borders, right? A new variant happening anywhere in the world can be everywhere in the world in a matter of weeks. Like cancer goes slowly, but it's everywhere. And so if you have a new cure, more people around the world can be cured. So those are the problems that have no borders, whether it's political or geographic. We all need that. Right?
So I'm completely throwing away the script that we talked about.
Sure, that's fine.
What was it like fundraising?
Actually, I didn't participate in the seed round. Okay. So even in 3 months, the professor, it was in the AI rush back 2015 it started, 16. and the SEC-17 is still pretty hot. So he basically, with his research, was able to raise the seed fund that was pretty sizable, I would say. And then as a early angel round, so I joined with their funding. I said
It's already had funding.
Early funding.
Yeah, right.
But since I joined, it has raised more than 200 million RMB, including from Philips.
Okay.
So that's why now it's over 100 people. So fundraising in China in last almost 5 years now, 4.5. I think it was easy up to 2018 when the capital market cooled down. The second half for about a year it became hard.
Yeah.
And then now it's coming back. Actually, for last year was back again, but this year was getting chilly again. So it goes different cycle. But all in all, if you're really solving a critical problems, especially China move away from just the traditional business model innovation, but more on the different vertical industry innovation with a lot of investment and solving a worthy problem. There's a big market and high quality. Then there you can attract good funding. Yeah.
So on the China side, because I'm going to come around and
Sure.
ask on the US side too.
Yeah.
But on the China side, this mood of trade war, right?
Yeah.
Your term. Have you experienced negative things on the China side because of concern about globalization and so forth? And I'm going to ask the same question
Sure.
about the US. Okay.
Sure. I actually played Go when I was 5. And I played Go for a long time. And then a little point is I was always proud when I was 18 at a very small city in China. I won the champion back then. So my life is always modeled after Go. In Go, basically, it's really about if you fight, the other side will fight. But at the master level, they don't fight. Basically, you have to set up the stage and then you engage in a very different strategic game using both the environment and the strengths of your stones. I do think when that happened, the US, obviously I'm not the expert on that. It's beyond my pay grade.
Yeah,
but the bottom line is,
practitioner.
But from a practitioner point of view, when that happened, then China also said, okay, if US did that, we would do the same thing. For example, protecting data and used to be more open, and nowadays it's extremely difficult. But also it's limiting foreign companies to do. If they don't manufacture in China, the healthcare space. So that do on the commercial side, it's make it more difficult.
Yeah. So basically, it became more difficult in China as a result of this kind of ramping up of friction.
Yeah.
On the US side, I mean, we've got all this stuff about, regulation against foreign investment and so forth. What's it been like over here?
I think my observation of entrepreneurs and talking to investors, I mean, entrepreneurs in particular are incredibly adaptive, right? And that's really the core competence. So when basically I see a lot of companies in the space, because also, I have a small fund invest in the space where the laws of US or China forbidden, technology collaboration or data collaboration, then they have to choose. They have to really choose either you be in the US or you be in China. Because I was general manager of Siemens technology business, so every year I would have looked at export import. So it was always an issue. You have to be trained. Lawyers, my best friend. So because we sign a lot of NDA and looking at this issue, but it's just with the trade war, the current issue become just elevated. But nevertheless, you really need to follow the new laws and regulations. And it often means you have
to. So you're obviously finding ways.
You have to find the ways, and also corporate as well. Large corporation, they cannot directly sell products that are not made in China or access data, like GE, Philips, Siemens, etc., or Medtronic. But then they can partner with local companies, right? So there are different ways that to still get the objective of treating, diagnosing people down. So, but you just need to find a new map.
So just before I get off this, what about rest of the world? When you talk about this to people in Europe or so forth, how do you see the US-China friction?
I think certainly US, Europe, and because the China, US, the volume, not only on trades, the collaboration, everything, it's just, very heavy. And then so when that is reduced, the goal has to be achieved. So you do see a reconfiguration of collaborations of China with Europe and increased. And obviously, with Europe, obviously, policy also with China is changing. So that's also interesting to watch, but also Southeast Asia in particular. So you do see whether it's the money or business completely reconfigure. And obviously with COVID, I would say COVID perhaps even do more to the change of the world order than even geopolitical frictions, divisions.
So this is kind of a techie sort of question, but certainly the accuracy of AI-based analysis increases the more data that is good data that you put into it, right?
Yeah.
So in this regard, is kind of tendency to not being able to share data across borders, is that of concern to the company?
Yeah, so I do think that's a concern, but obviously we know all the machine learning technology need data, good data, a lot of data. But on the other side, once you learn the model itself, that can be deployed commercially in different borders, all the regulations, the laws. So while data is not distributed, there's also technology development like federated learning that allow data to stay where they are and then still be able to learn through distributed learning. There was a big BRING initiative headed by Intel, University of Pennsylvania, with 17 countries where data never leave the country, but they can learn, all contribute to the
the idea behind federated learning is that what happens is you send the algorithm out to the servers where the data is stored. And there is protocols inside the central center where the analysis is happening about what order the data comes back and all of that. But essentially the data never is copied. The data is kept on the original server, and the adjusted algorithm with the new values from the data goes back to the center and is integrated into the program. So it's absolutely wonderful, even inside the US, for dealing with HIPAA. So
and that's just one form of privacy computing. There's also a new form of computing, can compute on encrypted data, right? But besides that, I think the old-fashioned way still works. Even during the trade war and more recently, last 2 years, I've seen a report, news. All leading cancer organizations are still collaborating with China, like including the recent one. So, for research purpose.
So I've got one more on the kind of fireside chat of this, and then we'll ask questions from the audience here and also on Zoom. The idea of, working against cancer being a great kind of ping pong diplomacy, that's wonderful. So how do you pick up from that and gradually build on top of that? You've taken the hard path. This is not easy. Right? And I think that we need people who will build bridges, and we need people who will take the hard path. But what are the most important things to build on this and really use it to restore good cooperation where cooperation is appropriate?
Yeah, so I can only speak from a practitioner and just some kind of a thinker. If you look at how the original ping pong policy, there was structure, issue between the two countries, not to, have a diplomatic relationship. So when that moment happened, it's actually, if you read it, it's fascinating. It's a sequence of things, right? Eventually led to the notice of the chairman of China, the president of the US. Eventually, it's like a butterfly effect. It's just a domino effect. It requires a collective of people ended up start a new movement and ended to the two countries reopen to each other. So it's hard to predict if the cancer research indeed will 10 years from now look back will be the new ping pong policy as Kevin Root predicted. But on the other side, it has a shot, and because this time it's not just two athletes, young athletes. This time is we are at a different era of the human history. The real-time communication video can break down communication barrier, at least from the individual and institution area. So there's a lot of willing people and want to work together. Hopefully that will, because that event, Prime Minister Kevin Root spoke a lot of who is who in politics, in commercial. So certainly, I hope this whole community globally could at least positively influence that. But just like the cancer, there are other areas, selected fields, US and China hasn't closed the collaborations. And hopefully the equal amount of people there or more are working on how to leverage each other's know-how resource to advance the campus.
Yeah, in this series a few years ago, we had a really interesting company from China that was scrubbing emissions and removing nitrous oxide and sulfur oxide from emissions, and they had done really well. I don't know if they really went global as much as they should have, but they were starting to aim at maritime uses. And, you know, scrubbing carbon dioxide out of emissions would not be a bad thing.
Yeah, totally. And another thing is, it's not really US-China these days, right? China is the second biggest economy, and unlike 40 years ago, China really has very little reach globally. These days, with the better the road initiative, it has reached half of the world. I mean, more than half of the world worldwide. So it is a global engagement, so how that evolve overall. Right now, there's a lot of issues to be solved, structural issues. But I think there are areas like I highlighted in the cancer fight. There could be a room for really, really close collaboration. And I think you build trust just like anything, right? And build understand each other's culture. But also there are issues do need to be confronted and solved. But there are other issues can be collaborated. So.
Okay. So let's open the floor to questions, and we'll start with questions from here in the classroom. Go ahead.
Okay.
Hi, thank you for taking the time. I have a question just structurally. How do you think these US-China, maybe even global collaborations, how do you think they will happen? Are there like previous examples in history where we've seen it? Because again, in the case of US-China, both countries are intellectually pretty self-sufficient. They have lots of resources, lots of top scientists. So what does a collaboration really look like?
Okay, so I should probably restate that for the people on Zoom. I'm not sure how well they could hear. So basically, what does this kind of new collaboration really look like? Especially, are there examples from prior history, or things that we can look at as guiding?
Yeah, I mean, there are obviously a lot of cases. I really believe the power of example. So if in whatever the field you found, whether in this room or online, look for examples, and you can find a lot online, and then see how that evolved, how that worked out. And I just showed a number of examples in the cancer. I tell you another example. One of the portfolio company we invested early a few years ago. It was a U.S. Chinese entrepreneur, and who, after his Ph.D. here, he saw there was a next generation machine learning for robotic monitoring in malls and grocery store, and he actually did his first demonstration and commercial agreement back before the trade war in China with one of the biggest mall owner in China in the world, and that really got the company going. And then afterwards, he was able to apply this scale back to US, and now is growing very rapidly in US. The point is, there are laws you have to follow, like in sensitive area, you don't want export import is always there. Now it's just more stricter, not only to China, but to many other countries. US do need to maintain its advantage, but on our side has to also university want to pre-completed research. So these are evolving. So you definitely need to check whenever you have a piece of technology, software, hardware, going from US to China, you have to really make sure you're compliant. Very, very important. A lot of people on the research side, I have to say, did not know about it, and then think they can take across borders in any countries. Big mistake, right? When I was at Siemens technology business, every piece of equipment, software, when we send to other country, we have to check, right? So these days it's just more strict. And but on the other side, there are things. If, like for example, in this particular cases, it's not the U.S. technology, but China. It's more. They was innovated, developed in China for over a decade with the doctors there. Although it's U.S. trained Ph.D., but it wasn't in this field before. So that kind of things, for now, it's fine. And I cannot imagine it wouldn't be fine in the future. But once you have a commercial product, as long as there's trade available, then if the product can be used elsewhere, you follow law, you do it.
So here you work with a lawyer who understands the regulations, and they basically try to keep you out of trouble. In China, do you have it in-house? Do you have people in-house who are really, they understand the government regulations through and through, or do you work with outside lawyers? How do you handle the?
Yeah, I think the in China, last 10 years, particularly last 5 years, the ecosystem of service, right, whether it's legal service or other kinds of service, has been professionalized. And so the company from the day one has been working with the leading law firm. I have engaged with them, and some of them are the global ones. They have office there, but some local one has grown very big. So those are very important. I do want to mention for a lot of entrepreneurs, particularly tech entrepreneurs, working with lawyers is not necessarily the thing they want to do. They want to stay as far away as lawyers as possible. They actually think they are in the road of their innovation. But I do see that's the complexity. If you do want to do global, become a global entrepreneur and cross-border, you do need to make sure you follow the law. In fact, it's lawyer, I have lawyer friends, I work with them, they're very creative not bending the laws, but creative in working with the laws and help you really advance your objective. One company in Silicon Valley called Freeport, they work on logistic shipping from different ports. It's one of the unicorn. And the laws on shipping from ports to ports, that's the most complex one. And they were able to solve that from the beginning, and not necessarily they have the expertise before. So it's just the knowledge you can learn, and tech people, they can learn a lot of complex equations or devices. I think they can, if they change the mindset, engage with lawyer, and then, they can tackle this issue. And many law firms have a very startup friendly pricing, particularly early stage. And so, so in Silicon Valley in particular. So, yeah, so I do think that's a new thinking if you want to work across border. But even locally, you have to do it, but it's way less.
So we got a question from Zoom. A lot of Silicon Valley company offshore R&D and tech teams into China are really trying to reduce the cost, such as Zoom. But a lot of other companies are still doing all their hiring from local for better sync up and fast turnaround and speed. What's your HR strategy, really? What's your company's practice and why?
Yeah, the company right now, it's focusing more, in China in the next 3 to 5 years, because that's where the big need are, 30% of the cancer deaths in China. But really was built with global in mind from the beginning, and with the Philips investment, the partnership with Electa, and also European. We have a US robotic surgery company. They actually licensed the technology from PVmed as well. So I think as the company continue to develop, as more funding come, there will be more talent hired at different locations. But I think it's complex, but also simple. It's always objective focus. It's really have to think back what objective you want to achieve, where you want to hire people. Are you trying to achieve expanding markets or getting competence you cannot get from the other location, or you want to reduce costs, or you want to what, right? And
well, the labor cost differences, are they really that much in your areas?
I think in machine learning, particularly in the tier 1 cities in China, like Shenzhen, Shanghai, and Beijing, it's almost as expensive, and some even more expensive than here. So it's not that much. Guangzhou is a little bit cheaper, but not that much. But I think it's more on how speed and also because data is the new oil, even especially with the AI economy. Data become essentially your competitive advantage, and this is where in China just have more population in the US, and this will help train data faster. So I do think you need to leverage that. In fact, I just want to plug in a story of the late radiology chairman, Dr. Gambier from Stanford. He's a giant in the field. I was at the oncology. I actually collaborated before from Siemens. I was at the cancer roundtable here about more than 2 years ago. So he spoke that Stanford actually during the trade war had a collaboration, and also Google with China, and they did in 3 months what in US could do more than a few years. He said also in one of the hospitals called Tiantan Hospital in China, the MR cancer scan is more than the sum of the entire West Coast. Take all the cancer hospitals scanned in a year that they scan in a month. Right. Yeah. So he basically said, stop bickering about data, we have to solve big problem. I mean, sadly, he passed away a few months later. Very, very, sad for this field. But the point is, people like him, it's really calling us to other people's lives that lots of people don't get out to that.
Absolutely. Let's open the floor to the audience for a question again. Back in back.
I was wondering if you could elaborate more on the transition you made from educational technology to medtech. I know you were inspired, by seeking a world not afraid of cancer, but were there any financial incentives to make that change, or was it solely that medtech had a more impactful mission? And do you still see?
Let me restate.
Okay.
So earlier you were working in ed tech, and so this moving into med tech, was that really, what was kind of your thinking at that point? Why?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Incentives, whatever.
First of all, I was in the medtech for my PhD and also at Siemens for a long time until I took a innovation management position, more than 2009 for the Siemens Tech business. So expanded out beyond the medtech. One thing is, after I left Siemens in 2017, the summer, I actually involved with two businesses. Those five very impressive founders. One is here, one is in Palo Alto, one is in Guangzhou, and one is in the medtech, one is in the edtech. So I was working on the edtech for a while. It was simultaneously, I was more advising and also help make some strategic development, leveraging my experience. And obviously with the COVID, the Silicon Valley Future Academy training a lot of leaders around the globe, the travel wasn't possible. So therefore the business has completely stalled. We do have a fund. And where this business I'm still affiliated with, and I could still continue to develop, but at a significant reduced capacity. And then this company, when they received in China, which was one of the company I have engaged, received the funding from Philips, and now in the growth phase. And so the funders said, hey, would you be interested to help out more and to be a president, co-chairman? And so I thought that could be, for me, learning about China again. I left China when I was a young age and really help saving people's cancer patients in China. I do think the medical imaging, for cancer treatment, diagnosis, in China will go through the same boom like what you see on the cancer drug in the next decade. That could come back to help US and worldwide. That is a noble thing to do. For me, I tend to spend the area very long, normally a decade. So I think I have, for my professional career, maybe another decade to do one thing. I think this is a noble thing to do. And also this field, as I said, is not affected as much by the current geopolitical atmosphere. In fact, if any, it could help. So it's a field I knew very well. So it is a choice to engage the company more fully than before. But definitely the COVID with the Silicon Valley Future Academy businesses putting on hold also has impact.
So I really don't want to get away from this kind of one foot in both countries. A few years ago, I was part of a National Science Foundation study about people who studied in the US and went back to work in China.
Yeah.
A lot of them really generated negative opinions among the people in China. They were regarded as arrogant. They were regarded as demanding too much money. They wanted a car and a driver, even if they were just a manager in the company. And so there was a lot of resistance against people going back. Now, one, did you run into that? And two, do you have suggestions for people to avoid that kind of problem?
Yeah, I think there's a culture issue. In China, looking to the eyes is very rude, but in US, if you don't look into the eyes, very rude. And there are many examples of that. The US very straightforward way in China can be looked very jerky. The China very circular way comes to US means very insincere. So there's a lot of these culture issue getting in the way. But also indeed, whether it's Chinese or Americans go to China, it can be certain behavior can be perceived very arrogant and very rude, and likewise vice versa as well. But we're also seeing a lot more, American or other national people. You can go to YouTube, just search for, non-Chinese national in China. There are a lot of people speak fluent Mandarin and they really understand the culture. and be able, I think in this era more than ever, there's a lot of tools, resources available these days, also digitally, to understand different culture, right? American has a great culture. We, build the most powerful country, and, for a long time, considered lighthouse of the world for the new model for the century. But China, of course, like India and other countries, has a rich history, has a lot to offer. One thing touched me when I was a Ph.D. at Hopkins, when the president, Ken Changling from UC Berkeley, he was the first Asian or Chinese president of UC Berkeley. He actually said one thing touched me back then. That's why I was looking at the cross-border of different countries, not just US, China, is that the East and the West, it's a fundamental different way of thinking, approaching life and work. But if they have good and bad, and if you can bridge that and learn from both, and you will, as an individual organization, you can grow wiser. and then that left a deep impression at the young version of me. So I have been always passionate about working across borders, whether technology, medicine, or other field, as well as countries. So it's very rewarding to see different perspectives. And I do think the younger generation are much more culture sensitive and aware than perhaps my generation.
Yeah, if I can make a comment on that. You may know that more than 60% of the technical workers in Silicon Valley were born in a foreign country.
Yeah.
And it's not just that we're getting great people to come from all over the world. I really think the diversity of the workforce here, where you do have different cultures and different ways of looking at problems and different ways of communicating, is something that has worked really well here.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that this lesson can be learned. It's not just immigration so that you can get highly qualified people.
Yeah.
It's so you get diversity, and focusing on that. Next week, I want to let everybody know that our speaker is Ms. Rachel Lau, who is founder and managing director of RHL Ventures, which is a Malaysia-based startup. I don't know if she's going to be speaking to us from Malaysia or if she's going to be speaking to us from Singapore, where she spends a lot of her time, not surprising. She's going to talk about Southeast Asia. And so we move on next week. For now, what we're going to do is call an end to the formal class session. If you can stay around a few minutes for informal conversation, please join me in thanking Chenyang again. Thank you so much.
Thank you.